Okay, now I'm going to tell you about my T-37 contact check on the 27th of July, 1970. I was doing pretty well in tweets and just moving right along and actually really enjoying it. So this one bright day comes up and I'm going up for my check ride. So I went down and met my check pilot, Captain George Dunkelberg, and we briefed the flight, went out, strapped in, and took off. First, we headed out to the area west of San Antonio and did all our air work, stalls and falls, and spin prevention, and aerobatics, and all kinds of things. Then dropped into Hondo for a few landings, a simulated single engine, no flap, and normal landing, and then came back to Randolph having logged a 1.6. We used step vans to travel between the Tweet side of Randolph and the 38 side. Our squadron buildings were all located on the 38 side of the base. So we get up in this step van, and I sit down on the bench. George sits down next to me, and he's still wearing his helmet. Now, that was not uncommon, so I didn't think anything about it. But he had his visor down, and again, I didn't think much about it. I was really enjoying myself. I felt I'd done okay. I felt I probably did pretty well. So we're riding in, and we're right between the bases, the two runways, and one of my classmates said, "Hey, Bob, how'd the check ride go?" And I went, "Shit hot." I said, "I had a blast." And so we got back to the squadron, went in, hung up our chutes, and I went down to check section to debrief. And when I got to check section and sat down with George, he said, "Bob, you did pretty well overall." He said, "with one glitch." He said, "On your simulated single engine approach, you neglected to put your flaps down." And oh shit. I just felt terrible because I knew I'd failed the check ride. My stomach just fell out. Matter of fact, I almost felt sick to my stomach. But I sat there and listened to the debrief and just felt terrible because in those days they didn't take prisoners. When you failed the check ride, that was the first indication, if you will, that you just might not measure up to the standards that they had to be an Air Force pilot. And I knew how serious it was, and I was just sick. I went back to the flight room with my grade sheet, and when Russ saw that I'd failed the check ride, he said, "Well, listen," he says, "don't worry." He says, "I don't see any problems." He said, "We all stumble every now and then." And he says, "This was just your day, unfortunately." And I said, "Swell." Well, I went home that night, and like I said, I was just sick to my stomach. I knew I was on my way to nav school. That's what happened to us in those days. But I got back, got my head back in the game, and flew my recheck, and did fine. About a couple weeks later, then, maybe 3-4 weeks later, George shows up in the flight room, walks over to my desk, my table there, and he said, "Bob," he says, "I've been assigned to fly with you for your T-37 cross country." He says, "If you would object to that or have any objections to it," he says, "I'll understand." And I looked at him and I said, "Sir," I said, "no," I said, "I'm the one that failed the check ride, not you." I said, "Matter of fact, I enjoyed it until I did that dumbass single engine no flaps." He kind of chuckled, and I said, I would really enjoy flying with you." I said, "I learned a great deal that day." So we just left it at that, and when the cross country came, it wasn't a real exciting cross country. We took off, flew over to Kelly, which was about maybe 30 miles across town, got gas, and flew down to Laughlin. And while flying down to Laughlin, low level VFR, we had a little bit of fun. And we landed at Laughlin, And then the next day, took off out of Laughlin and flew down the river, down the Rio Grande to Laredo. Not a lot of excitement there, but we spent the night at Laredo, and then on Sunday we came home. I learned a great deal from George, both on that check ride and on that cross-country ride. I learned a lot about keeping my head in the game when I'm in the airplane, and about humility. And I learned about preparing myself for check rides. That check ride failure left such a taste in my mouth that I never failed another check ride the rest of my flying career for the next 34 years. I just did not like that feeling. So I owe a great deal to George for helping me see it for what it was. And I'll always be grateful to him for that. A side note on this cross-country, John McBroom, one of my assigned IPs, who was also our class commander, was also on that same itinerary as we were. So we get into Laughlin that night when all of us went over and had dinner at the club. Next morning, got up, headed out to airplanes to go fly that exciting trip down the river to Laredo. And John is over there fretting around, can't quite figure out what to do. Well, in those days, we had these locks on the airplane that came up and locked the stick so that you couldn't fly. And John had lost the keys to the lock. Sucks to be you, John. We'll see you at Laredo sometime later the day. At any rate, that was my experience with my T-37 contact check and subsequent cross-country. And George, if you happen to stumble on this, thank you. Take care.